So I'm so excited and really full of joy that today I have this possibility to welcome Amanda Kiessel to the Conscious Evolution Summit. Amanda, welcome.
Thank you. I'm happy to be with you.
Did I pronounce your last name correct? I didn't ask.
Yes.
Wonderful. And Amanda Kiessel is co-founder of Good Market, a curated community of social enterprises, responsible businesses, voluntary organizations, and changemakers working to create a 21st century economy that's good for people and good for the planet. The online platform includes over 1,400 enterprises from 47 countries. Amanda is originally from the United States, but has been based in Asia since 1999. She has a PhD in environmental studies, a master's in sustainable international development, and a degree in biology with a specialty in ecotoxicology. Before Good Market, she spent nearly 15 years working with local organizations on agroecology and sustainable food system, organizational change and social enterprise development. And Amanda is also an Akasha Fellow. And really, as I shared just in our brief chat we had before I pressed the recording button, I was really looking for a speaker here in the summit, bringing the economics and how we trade and how we are offering services and being in service for people and the planet. And it was not so easy to find someone where I would resonate with. And thanks to my older daughter, Laura, we are now having this possibility to being together and to seeing what you kind of really discover and what you see, what is changing and what is needed from us as individuals to really make big changes possible. But before we go into that, I would like to hear a bit from your, let's say, story so that we can dive into your universe. So how did you grow up and what did happen in your life that you took this path engaging in this area, Amanda?
Yeah. So I grew up in a really beautiful area in northern Michigan, a rural area, and I spent a lot of time outdoors connecting with nature. I had family, both sides of my family were coming from farming backgrounds. And so I became very concerned about ecological issues at a young age. And I think when I was first, and I felt like I needed to learn as much as I could, be exposed to different things. And when I was first starting out, I thought that maybe we would have technical solutions. If I understood science and I understood ecology and I understood that, then I'd be able to understand how we deal with these challenges we're facing. And as time goes on, you realize that we have to understand people. And so the work on ecosystems shifted more to also understanding social systems. How does change happen? How do movements happen? Community organizing, all of those things. And I think at that point still, I was actually, I'm not surprised that you had a hard time finding people who were comfortable, wanted to talk about the economy. Because I also felt, especially I think if you're working in those spaces, sometimes it feels dirty almost. But as time goes on and you start to realize that it's a human structure, it's something that we create, right? And so it became kind of a natural thing. It's like, if we're really concerned about making shifts, we have to engage with this, right? We have to be comfortable with this. We have to be able to talk about this. And so increasingly the work shifted more to being able to look at, how economic systems work, really deeply understanding that and understanding the possibilities for shifting to a new way of being, right? So it's been kind of ecosystems to social systems to economic systems has been the progression. And along the way, I've been really fortunate to to get a chance, both on an academic side, which is what you shared in the bio, which is not something I like normally present as being part of me, but both on the academic side, but also just being incredibly fortunate to get to work with people who, you know, both spiritual leaders, but also practitioners, people just doing amazing work on the ground. My experiences in Sri Lanka have had a really big influence on me. I was there during the tsunami and during the war and during terrorist attacks. So being surrounded by people there that were doing incredible work had a big influence. So that's a little bit of the background that got things to where they are today. But it's not really, I mean, it's less the story about me. It's more been just about learning about all the people that are doing this work and being able to, you know, hopefully hold space and help get those voices amplified has been kind of the main focus.
And how was it for you, Amanda? I just wonder, because I mean, I spoke now to more than 100 experts, and what I can see really a pattern that there seems to be some, let's say, some seeds already happening in the childhood, as you also said, but then it's also a matter really being able to listen to, and to attune to what really calls us, because often what we hear in schools or in our families, or what society tells us what is important and what we should achieve and what are values, is often not really in alignment with what our heart and our soul tells us. And maybe you can share a bit, I mean, what is your way of listening to that? And because it's different, we all have different ways to tuning in. And how does it show up for you when you sense, life really calls me there and this is my direction?
Yeah, that's such a fantastic question. Yeah, I think I've met many people that later in life realized that something was out of alignment, and it's hard to shift paths, right? And that's something I actually really enjoy, is talking to people who are at that point and are getting ready to step onto a new path. I think for me, the questions are always kind of checking in. So knowing it's not a straight line, right? We have kind of a direction we're moving in, and just constantly checking in. You know, does it feel right? Is it in alignment? And it's usually around, you know, am I learning? Am I putting myself in situations that challenge me and push me to learn? But also, am I being useful? Am I serving the community around me? Am I serving kind of a larger vision? And if those two things are lined up, and then it feels like I'm on the right path. And when they're out of alignment, it's a sign that, okay, we need to be adjusting things a little bit. So that's kind of how it's worked for me. It's you know, learning, and also is it being useful? Mm-hmm. I mentioned earlier my family. I come from a farming family, and so when they heard I'm working with farmers on the other side of the world, you know, I got a lot of teasing about, you know, we have challenges here, you could be working here. And it was because at that time I could see that I could support in a particular way. You know, I was able to be of service in a way there. And so that was the right place to be at the time. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of what I've used to check in. I think different people have different ways of doing that, mm-hmm. but I think it's so important.
Absolutely. And I really love that you brought this quality of learning, because my sense is that, especially in the time where we are now in, life really asks us to learn and to step out of our comfort zone and to expand and to move into areas and maybe capacities we wouldn't think of that it's possible. So it's not always just an easy, calm, nice flow. We can really be pushed to the edges. Absolutely. And to make it a bit more personally, do you have just maybe one or two situations in mind when you think back where you can share, oh, this was really a situation where I needed to expand my capacity in a certain way, or to be in that service, which I sense is necessary, I need to grow. I need to learn.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe one when I was quite young. I mean, I grew up, like I said, in a rural area, and there was a sense that if you really care about the planet and ecological issues, about needing to understand other cultures, other ways, other worldviews, other frameworks, other ways of looking at things. So there was a push, kind of this inner sense from really young, that as much as I care about that landscape and that community, that I needed to put myself into situations where I was encountering other ways of looking at things. So I started, I remember telling my family when I was 15 that I wanted to go live in Brazil for a year as an exchange student. That didn't work out. It took me a bit longer before I was able to do something, but there was this sense that I needed to understand different cultures. So that was a really early one. A big one that happened more recently is when I decided to stay in Sri Lanka, it was, the idea was to work on things that were self-sustaining. And then because of the tsunami and the war, I ended up in a situation where the organization I was working with was getting a lot of aid funding. And I got to see a lot of the challenges with that space. There are some things that don't work so well in how the aid industry works. And so there was a deep sense of being out of alignment, right? I cared very much about the people I was working with and wanted to support, but at the same time didn't feel that it was the right path. And that was a very hard transition. That was one where it took a lot of time. Even when you know that it's the right transition, if you're trying to make transitions smoothly, sometimes it can take a bit to shift yourself. So that was a more recent one. And that was a process. It took until almost 2012 to be able to make that shift.
Mm.
So, yeah.
Thank you for sharing.
You can sense, right? You can sense when something's not quite right and needs to be shifted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and sometimes still you sense it, and then it can take a while till you are able to really make the steps and the actions in order to move into another direction. Yeah. And I mean, what I also see is that I would say, what I often notice is when we have deeper realizations of what we truly are, and when we really notice that basically we are not separate from our environment, we are not separate from nature, we are not separate from anything, then sooner or later there comes this wish to contribute in a different way and to be of service and to really bring what we realize and what we sense into different areas. Then just sitting and meditating or doing different kinds of practices or being secluded somewhere. I mean, for some, maybe it still works, spending 20, 30 years in a monastery or whatsoever. But for many, many, I see then there is this call and this pull to bring it to the marketplace, basically.
Yeah.
And I mean, I see you nodding, so I guess you have a similar experience, and maybe you can share that a bit, how this individual deepening really then also translate to an engagement in the environment.
Yeah, that's been a big part of something it's had a big influence on me. I've been part of there's a network of, they call themselves a network of engaged Buddhists, but it includes people of all different spiritual backgrounds, and it's exactly about that point, right? It's about combining, having our practice extend beyond the cushion, beyond the mat, to what the work that you do in the world, right? And that's and those two things so strongly reinforce each other, right? Because I know a lot of amazing activists that when they aren't doing the inner work, you can burn out. You know, those two things have to go together. And at the same time, there is a sense of, if you have done a lot of inner work, the next step then is to take that practice out into the world and how you engage with other humans and, you know, the environment and everything like that. So I think the combination of those two things is really, really critical, you know, having an engaged spirituality, you know, the inner work and the outer work, and being able to combine those two things. And I think also finding a support community, right, of people that are also trying to hold that space. I think that's very helpful, you know, to have find other people wherever they happen to be in the world that are trying to do their inner work, whatever their practice is, and are trying to do work in the world. When you find other people that are doing that, it makes it much easier.
Yeah. Yeah, and maybe we can transition to Good Market, where you're co-founder of. So maybe, I mean, people, of course, I provide the link. They can have a look at the website, but maybe describe in your words how it started and what is it about?
Yeah, it started because, so when we're talking about a new economy, and there's lots of words around it, right? Whether you're talking purpose economy, well-being, regenerative, sustain, whatever words we're using. When we're talking about transitioning to a new economy, I think one of the things that's really exciting is it's already happening, right? This shift is already happening, right? There are millions of individuals and organizations that are choosing to operate in a new way already, right? So, I mean, and I'll get to Good Market in a minute, but the idea with Good Market is to support that transition. That's the whole idea behind it. So basically, if you take where we are currently, right? We have a dominant story. It's a story that we humans create, and that's about extraction, maximizing profit, accumulating financial capital, right? That's the rules, the story and the rules we're currently working of the current dominant system. But the part that's exciting is that there are so many people that are choosing a different story, right? And we have different language around it, but basically people are choosing to prioritize people and planet in their decisions, right? They're making different choices, both in their personal choices and their choices in the work that they're doing. And the thing is, I think because, and this is just part of a process of evolution, that you can't still see the full scale of this movement, right? Because it's fragmented. It's we're using different words in different parts of the world, and different communities. We have different language around it, right? So there are groups that are talking about, things with fair trade, or there's now benefit corporations, and there's very different words when you're getting into Asia and Latin America. So people are using different language around it, but the underlying piece is the same, right? That they're working according to a different story, and they're voluntarily choosing to operate according to a different set of rules, right? And this, it's incredibly inspiring to be able to start seeing this. When you start to have this lens and you're looking for that, you start to see that this is coming up everywhere, right? This is not something often in the places you'd least expect it, right? But it's coming up everywhere. There are people making these different choices. And so the idea with Good Market is to make it easier for everyone to find and connect with each other, right? And so when there are kind of communities or networks that already exist, to also increase their visibility. So we're not trying to push the Good Market story. We're trying to highlight the story of the networks and the communities and the enterprises and the people that are already doing this work, so that people are able to find and connect with each other more easily. So that's kind of the idea behind it. Because one of the things that you start to see is that when people have made this personal shift and they're making choices in a different way, right? They've extended their personal practice to these kinds of choices. When people make that personal shift, they prefer to support others that are working according to the same values, right? And that's how the ecosystem grows, right? That's how things expand. Is the first step is that we're making different choices. The second step is that we're collaborating with others that are in the new economy. Right? So that's kind of the underlying story behind it.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, you are in that area already since a while. I mean, beside that you see it growing and that there are many different networks and organizations sharing those values all over the world, what else do you notice? What do you see? Because I mean, especially in this year, things seem to really to intensify, to speed up, to accelerate. What do you notice? What is happening in these areas?
Yeah, I mean, it's like any transition, right? It's not smooth and it's not easy. And there's a big question of whether we'll make this shift in time, right? That I would say, if I have to say what my primary underlying concern and passion is we are all together co-creating a new way of living. The question is whether we can do it in time, considering that, you know, with climate change and with other, you know, the other realities and pandemics and things with, like, you know, refugees and migrants, all of this, whether we can make this shift in time. So that's this underlying concern. I think, yeah, I think there's a couple things that in terms of, you know, where we're directing energy, I'll get back to the personal stuff maybe in a bit, but one is if you think of it as an ecosystem, right? The ecosystem is evolving, right? And we end up, if we're going to try and only work with other groups that are in this new economy, we have gaps in our ecosystem, right? You know, maybe I can make almost all my choices when it comes to food and clothing, maybe housing. I can make choices that are aligned, right, with this new way. But maybe I'm still having a hard time when it comes to certain finance things or transport or energy, depending on where I'm at, right? So those end up being gaps in the ecosystem, and they're areas that need a lot more energy, especially on things related to finance, right? So that's a whole nother topic, but that's definitely something I'm seeing. And so I'm seeing more groups that are taking on the challenges of some of the hard challenges that we're like taking on the challenge of here's a gap and I'm going to put my energy here. So that's kind of one thing that's happening. And then another thing I think is really important is more and more collaboration between these kinds of groups, right? Because there's a tendency to be, you know, to say this is my brand and this is my story that I'm putting out to the world. And then other people who maybe have shared values but have a slightly different way of sharing it can almost seem like competition. Right? So a big challenge right now is to start to be like, yes, we each are coming at this, maybe it's slightly different, you know, ways of working, but recognizing this underlying shared values and shared principles that we're all kind of moving in the same direction together. So greater collaboration. And then that extends, and this part is really important, to kind of the systems level rule change, right? So there's work that we're doing voluntarily. All of us are making a choice for a new story, new rules, right? But that gets to a point where we can only get so many people who are making voluntary choices. And so we do have to collaborate with each other to start changing the system level rules, right? To start changing the rules of our own, you know, governments or our own communities, things like that. So I think those kind of three areas of, yeah, and also kind of looking at the ecosystem gaps of being able to collaborate and being able to work together on these system level rules are kind of three main areas that I'm seeing more people directing energy towards, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And is there in that an area where you especially are called forth to put your passion in, your energy in, or is it really kind of all this area?
Yeah. Yes. So I think for me, it's more about holding space, right? So it's about helping people see their connections across each other, you know, across maybe their language divides or the words that they're using. So that's a big piece of it. And also being able to help as people want to get more engaged, help them find their niche, help them find where they fit into that system. To help make the overall movement more visible. So I'm very much in kind of a behind the scenes, holding the space sort of role. I think more of a bridging role, right? If you take the entire spectrum of people that are choosing to work in this kind of way, people are coming at it from different angles, right? You have people that are coming maybe from more of a spiritual background, and for them being able to talk about, you know, money in new ways, or talk about self-sustaining models in new ways, that's the area that they need, that feels a little like they need to be able to work on. And then you also have people who are coming maybe from a more corporate business background, and they're very comfortable with that language, right? But there's an element of being able to deepen their practice and understand the links with, you know, the inner work, and the links with, you know, connecting with other humans, and about the environmental background. And so you have a really big spectrum of people that are choosing to live in a different way. So being able to recognize and value each other, and see the different roles that we play, I'd say more that holding space and kind of a bridging role ends up being more the work that I'm doing at the moment.
Mm-hmm. So I really get this sense of the space holder and networking, and really sensing which pieces to connect where, and yeah, I really get that. And I also wonder, I mean, when we talk about this, we also kind of, the next area which pops up is our financial system.
Yes. Yeah.
It's so intertwined.
Absolutely.
Is there anything you would like to share about that? What you see, what is kind of, what shifts are needed, and how we could make those shifts?
Yeah. This is, I think this is one of the things that helps when you think about it from more of an evolution perspective, right? Because first, it helps to remember that where we are now is not where we've always been, right? And that money and all of the ways that we talk about it and think about it, it's a story that we humans came up, it's a construct, it's something we humans came up with. And that story has changed over time, and it can continue to change. And so I think keeping that at kind of the beginning point is really helpful, right? Because it makes us feel not quite so locked in, right? Especially when we remember this is such a tiny piece of human history, right? If you look everything we're dealing with at the moment with nation states and the way that, you know, the way that finances work, this is recent. It's changed in the past. We can change it going forward. So I think that's a really important thing before we get into anything related to financial systems. Just that sense of kind of almost a sense of empowerment, right? That this is something we humans developed and we humans can change. So yeah, so I think you know, in the early stages, it's often related to how we personally are engaging with anything to do with the financial system. So it's that piece I already talked about, the things of the personal choices and those financial differences. As we're moving forward, there's a lot of work happening on different ways of thinking about and working with money. And it's going to take quite a bit. There's like coming up in different spots, and they're sharing information with each other to make this shift. But the biggest shift that needs to change is we currently, the way that we are creating money, our fiat currency, the way we create money, is very disconnected from the natural world and the world of goods and services, right? So we have a system where money is created through debt, and then that requires the interest and that's where this drive for we have to have growth is coming from. It's linked to how we create money. But the part that's exciting is there are different ways of working with and creating money. So there's things, you know, with mutual credit and community currency, and that you can start with them now. So we're seeing groups that are using it as kind of a supplementary thing, right? They're still linked in to the current economy, but they're introducing this as a way to supplement and to have resilience within their communities. So you have like Sardonyx, you have Open Credit in the UK. There's a wonderful initiative called Cambiatus. So there's people who are working on this. And now as we start to have more exchange with each other, right, it makes it a little bit faster. It's speeding things up a bit, right? And so you can start to see the seeds of where this is coming from, right? But at the end, to be able to make the big shift, it will be all of us who are doing this voluntary work, starting to get together and change some of the system level rules, right? That's the big piece. That's what's coming. That's what has to come, right? Because at the moment, if we are going to get beyond this mentality about accumulating financial capital and about we have to grow and all of that, this is a root issue, right? So many of the challenges we're experiencing with the climate and with our social systems, it comes down to this core bit right here that we're going to have to work on. So it's a matter of first changing the story, helping people realize that other stories are possible, helping people see that people are already putting these stories into practice, right? And as the stories start to shift, it becomes easier to start changing some of the system level rules. So I don't think we can say right now, this is what it's going to look like, right? Because we're all co-creating it together. But we can see patterns. We have a sense of what are the principles that need to be behind it. There are a lot of people doing really great work. It's certainly an area that needs more work. But a big shift is needed in that space. I'd say particularly when it comes to the way that money works and the underlying financial structures, that's a big shift, right? And so sometimes that can feel kind of too big and overwhelming, and that's part of the reason for keeping the focus on the choices we're making in our daily lives and work, right? Does that make sense?
Absolutely, yeah. And I mean, yeah, really also remembering that we all have the power. We have the power in the choices we make and which systems we support, or in which companies we work, or how we treat each other. That's a lot already, yeah.
Yes.
And I'm connected also with the husband from a friend of mine. He's a lawyer in the States, and he, just a few years ago when I visited them, he said, it's so difficult for CEOs of huge companies to shift their values, because basically the American law tells them that they need to put the financial profit on the first. So they are against the law when they would put people or planet first. This is how the laws are just right now, and he's very much engaged in trying to change and shift these laws, that people have this legal structure in order to really shift differently, move differently, work differently. And how is your experience, do you notice already also shifts in that areas? Are you also connected to people which take
yes, very much. Yeah. And that area, there's actually quite a bit of space. This is the kind of example of when we get together and we collaborate to change system level rules. This is one of those areas that we can work on, right? So I think maybe two pieces that are maybe relevant to that. One is that that rule in the US that you have to maximize profit for owners, or you have to maximize profit for shareholders, it wasn't so much that's not legislation that came through the courts, which makes it easier to change, right? And you have a lot of people working on that. So you have people working on new forms that make it very clear that our purpose is locked in. And you have people working on, with the existing companies, being able to make it clear, no, that's actually not a requirement, that you have to do that. And you're starting to see shifts. I mean, even there's a round table of some of the biggest corporations, and they came out with a statement about 6 months ago, maybe almost a year ago, where they said, actually, maximizing returns for shareholders, we agree now that is not the role of the business community. And that was some of the biggest names. So that story, I think that's the first piece. Changing that story. What is the purpose of business? What is the purpose of us coming together? When we change the story, it's easier to change the rules, right? And I think the other piece of that there was something else there that I wanted to share. The other piece of that is remembering what the roots of corporations are, right? When we first, as humans, came up with this idea of a corporation, to be able to, it was the people who give the authority. That we as people give the corporate charters. The state gives a corporate charter. And in the early days of that, which is not that long ago, we're talking just, in the last couple hundred years, very short in human history, when we were first playing with this idea of corporations, as a corporation, you had to show that you were benefiting society to be able to get your charter. And your charter had an expiration date. And then you had to, if you wanted to renew it, you had to show that you were benefiting society, right? So this idea, this is a story. This is something we as humans came up with. We've tried different models and we can change it. So getting not, from the point of now where the idea is not just that you're maximizing shareholder profit, but getting back to the point where if you want a charter from we the people, right, you have to show that your business or organization or corporation is benefiting society, or you don't get a charter. That's where we need to get to, right? Multiple steps along the way, but that's where we need to get to, right? If you want to come together as a group, you have to show that you're benefiting society and the planet. Yeah.
Wonderful. And I just wonder, Amanda, when I'm listening to you and I assume maybe there are some people here listening to our conversation that maybe feel called to be part of this network of Good Market. Which is the best way to start? And maybe you can share how they would benefit if they would really come into a network like that.
Yeah, so getting involved is really easy. It doesn't cost anything, right? It's free to be part of the platform, but it's curated, which means that everyone that's involved and has a profile, they're going through an application review process, right? Showing they're good for people, good for planet. And it's a community managed curation process. There's a crowdsourced monitoring system. So we all together, this belongs to us. These standards belong to us. They can improve over time. We all help monitor the system. So to be able to get involved, it's at goodmarket.global. There's a page where people can apply. And I think a key point here is that, everybody's story is different. So people are using the forum to share their story. That's kind of the idea. And if things don't apply to what the work you're doing, you just select no. It's no problem. Everybody's working on this in a different way. Our stories are a little bit different. It's about being able to share our story. But the part that's been fun is I think initially the first groups that were getting involved were often groups that had, physical products or services, right? So we had, people doing things with agriculture or with clothing or homemade soaps and all different kinds of things, all different levels, some very large organizations and businesses as well, co-ops. But as time has gone on, more and more people are signing up that are bringing all different things to offer to the community, right? So there are writers and yoga teachers, and there's people who are graphic designers, all different kinds of things like that. And also, it's not restricted to groups that are involved in money, right? So there are a lot of voluntary networks. There are groups that get together on the weekend and go plant trees or clean up the beach. There's chapters of Extinction Rebellion that have gotten on the platform. All different kinds of groups like that. And I think that's the part that's really exciting, right? Is that we're then able to start to see each other and see really, truly the scale of this movement that's coming up, right? So so it's free to be involved. It's anything, if you have something to offer, products or services, doesn't have to involve money. You don't have to be registered as a business, right? You can be part of it. So that's kind of the story of how to get involved. The reasons that people sign up really vary. I think there's some people that want to feel connected to something bigger. That's particularly true for people who feel a little bit more isolated. We've had groups sign up in the middle of the Pacific. Actually, when I first saw that one, I thought that they put the wrong location on the map because the pin was in the middle of the ocean. They're on a very small island. And I think for them, it's more about feeling connected to this broader movement, feeling part of the community. So there's that. That's a big piece of it. Others, it's about increasing their own visibility, right? Wanting to be seen, wanting to be able to, and then another piece is being able to connect with each other. So either you have something to offer that other communities might be interested in, or you're looking for things, right? You're trying to make better decisions, and you're trying to find people that might have products or services that meet your requirements. So I think it's a bit of a mix. When people sign up, they're good market approved. There's some people that like that, right? They want to be recognized as being good market approved. But I think one piece that I want to make, like, I really want to emphasize is this is there to support existing groups and networks as well, right? So we have networks that are signing up that have their own story and their brand, right? And so it's set up so they can have their own network page. It looks like the homepage of the site, but it's their community, their story, their logo, their whole community on that page. And you can search within that. And you can search for offers and marketplace listings in that. You can have community spaces for that group. Because I think that's a really big piece of it is, you know, everyone does need a space for their own community. People that they really, is like a support group, a peer group that they really resonate with. But at the same time, we don't want to all be in silos. We want to see across that and be able to connect with other groups. So it's kind of set up in that way that we can have spaces for our community, but we can still connect with each other across communities. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And when I hear that, I just wonder, it seems really that it has been growing to a large network. And I wonder how you manage all of that just on a logistic level, you know, organizing, bringing all of that together, the technique behind it, which makes that possible. So maybe you can share a bit that, because it started much smaller and now it's
yeah.
a movement. How did that happen, and how do people show up and support that?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think it would work if you treated it as a normal, as a software business or something like that. This has been a grassroots initiative, right? So this is community-owned platform, right? And that's the only reason it works, is because people that are in the community are inviting each other, right? Inviting others to sign up. And you have networks that are getting their own networks on the site. There's a community translation project. So it's currently, I think on the site, there's 7 languages. And it's been a real surprise to find out which ones have been the fastest, some of which I would not have guessed. And it's open for if people have their own language that they want to get on. And it's been fun, like languages like Armenian and Tibetan, people where they want their own language to be seen. You know, you'll get like a community project and people say, yes, we want to work at getting our own language on the platform. So that's what makes it possible, you know, is that it's very much, like I said, it's holding space, right? And letting other people, like everyone has the energy and the things that they're passionate around. And it's just about helping to make all that visible. So then it's less of a burden on actually making, actually running the software.
Yeah, and I really get the sense of an ecosystem in itself. Really, what you describe is very diverse, very many different areas are included, and the technique, the people, the connections, the engaging in different areas, supporting this large-scale shift. So it's really, I'm impressed about this ecosystem.
This is still baby steps. There's a very long way to go, but it doesn't feel overwhelming when you think we're all doing it together, right? If this is something being co-created, yeah, then we can do this, right? Mm-hmm. I think it might be useful, if you're interested, I can share the story of how we started it and how it got financed, because
Absolutely.
I think for a lot of people who want to do this kind of work, that can become a barrier, right? When you have kind of something you're wanting to work on and build, and then where do you get the resources and how do you start, right? So in this case, the people that were kind of holding the space at the beginning, we had come out of this experience with aid funding. Because of the tsunami and the war and all of that. And so we were really committed to the idea that this needed to be community supported, community owned, that it shouldn't be something, we'd seen too many projects where they got donor funding, everything looks great, and then everything stops, right? And we'd seen software platforms like that. You know, they got funding from outside, and the software got built, but there's not a community on it, and the funding runs out, and that's the end of it, right? So and the thing is to develop software, it's resource intensive. It takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of resources to develop software. So it was kind of how to do this. We don't want to take this kind of external, how do we do this? And so it actually started with what they call a lean startup approach, right? Of kind of testing the model in a small way. And it started with a physical marketplace. That was a way of testing this curation process, right? Here's the standards, here's the application, does this even work? Are people interested? And it was tested in Sri Lanka first. And part of the reason for that was, and it actually in some ways would have been much easier, to do it in a place like the US where I grew up, right? But part of the reason for wanting to test it in a place like that is for this to really work, it has to work for people around the world. It has to work for people who maybe don't have the same internet access, or who have, are working across different languages, or, they're in rural areas, and all, it has to work for people at all different levels of society. And so a big piece of testing it in Sri Lanka is it's got to work in this part of the world first before we can try it in other places. And so the physical marketplace was a wonderful way to start. And it's actually something that we've helped other people start physical marketplaces of their own in other communities, because we've seen the potential of it. It's such a great way of building ecosystem in a local area, and it doesn't cost anything to really start. It's like everybody puts their money together and rents the space, right? And it isn't a big thing to be able to start at that. And then what happened is that we expected that just to test something, but it ended up becoming really popular, and it's still ongoing today. And that eventually led to some other initiatives in Sri Lanka. And from that's where the resources came from to be able to start the platform development. So that's kind of the story. And the nice thing about that also is it meant that, even when we're very early stages of the software development, we're able to test it with people from all these different backgrounds. There would be people who had come from an international background who were there, or people who were, farming groups, or people making crafts and things like that. And it doesn't work until it works for everybody, right? So that was a really useful process at being able to test it with a community to start. And so it's been very recent, actually, that it's really been opened up and people are translating and using it all over the world. And it's been exciting to see how fast it's been spreading, which has been really great.
Incredible. Congratulations. I'm really so excited and inspired. And what I also get, Amanda, is I sense really a very strong, caring, motherly quality when I'm with you. So this space holder and this caring quality is so palpable in how you are just being there with me, with us, everyone watching. And I wonder, do you see also more women coming into that, engaging in this area?
Yes.
Just popped up this question.
Yeah. I even in the very early stages when you could actually physically see the community, right? There was a very high percent of women, right? But there's an important piece that I want to bring up here, and I think this is the issues that we have around patriarchy and feminism and all of this. It hurts men as well, right? Because I've met many men that want to do work according to their purpose, maybe feel that what they're doing is out of alignment and want to do something that's of service to society and the environment. And often, particularly in certain cultures, but they often feel a big pressure to be the provider for the family and to take on certain roles. And so I think that the more that, the goal is that we want to be able to include as many people as possible as we're trying to make this transition as humanity together, right? We want people who, have disabilities, or people who are coming from all different backgrounds to bring their unique wisdom to this, right? And so it's wonderful that this has been a space where there are so many women contributing, but we also want to create a world where we don't put the pressure on the men that you can't live according to your purpose, right? So I think it's very much about wanting to make it so that as many people as possible can get involved, because it's the people who have a particular experience and background that know their own communities and challenges the best. And they're the ones coming up with just amazing solutions in their local area, you know? And so we want as many of them as possible to have the space to be able to do that.
Beautiful. And Amanda, we are coming at the end of our time, and I would love you to imagine our world maybe 30, 40, 50 years from now, and maybe many, many people joining Good Market or similar networks, and maybe being able to shift systems and to change their inner values, their stories. And when you connect to that, and when you really expand into the future, what would you like to see? What would be the version of a world when a fairy would come, Amanda? You can build your future. What would you like to see?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure how long it will take, right? But, and it's certainly not, Good Market's role is just to catalyze. We're not attached at all to the name or the network. The goal is just to help speed up. The movement is so much bigger than any one group. But the vision is, so for me personally, I'd like to be able to make all my choices in a way that feels aligned with my values, right? So in this future world, right, every choice of how, obviously things like food and clothing and where you live and where you get your energy from and all of that all of these things of how I travel and, you know, the options I have about, you know, financial, who I'm working with for anything with banking, all of that is within this space, right? And that when I travel to other communities, I'm able to visit the wonderful things that are happening in their communities, right? I'm able to find those kinds of initiatives. I'm able to stay in accommodation that matches the values, right? I'm able to travel in a way that does that. So there's that piece, right? I think a big part of what I'm seeing and I'm excited about is a relocalization of our material economy. So the physical things that we use, right? So that's really exciting. So local food systems, local waste systems, so that we're really moving towards a zero waste world. So very much what people within kind of the eco-village movement and that space are working towards. But also, you know, it's that same thing within our urban communities and things like that. So a greater sense of connection, support systems, relocalization of the material economy. But our information economy being something that's global, so that we're able to learn from each other, right? That when I have a challenge in one part of the world and I can look and find who else is dealing with the same challenge and we can share, and then I can adapt that to our specific experience, right? So it's a world, and the other piece is being able that the groups that are doing this work see each other in all our diversity, and that we're able to work together and helping shift the story for others, right? And also being able to change these system level rules. So, yeah.
Beautiful. I resonate with all what you've shared. And the only thing I want to add is that I dream of clear, clean water.
Yes.
All over the planet. I have just a sense when we will see clear water again, we know that we made a huge shift.
Yeah.
So I sense this really connected, and it's always just cool and hurting wherever I notice that the water is polluted.
Thriving natural ecosystems. That's the only way we as humans will thrive, because we're part of it. It's all one thing, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you so much, Amanda. Time is really going so fast. I could listen for hours to you, and maybe we find a way in a different setting to reconnect. And I would like to share whenever you have something you would like to share, I'm happy to also share it in the newsletter I'm sharing with the audience of the summit. So I would really love to stay connected.
We have to get your work on the Good Market platform.
Wonderful. And I also want to thank everyone who was following our conversation today. And I bet when you have opened your heart and when you tuned in the presence and the care and the love and the experience and the expertise which Amanda brought today into the space, I know that you are inspired and you go out of this conversation with some inspiration and maybe some motivation in which way you can align according to your values on an individual level, or maybe in your company, or maybe bringing something into the networks you are engaged. And I want to thank you for taking this time, because I know that you, when you watch our conversations, you also care very much about our world and the state we are in. And together, I deeply believe coming with our heart into a resonant field and vibrating in that and noticing our connectedness, and that we do that together, this gives really vibrations into the field, and different answers will come back and synchronicity will start. And I'm so sure that we can, even though it looks sometimes difficult, but we can make a change, and we can make a change happen. So thank you for being part of that summit, and thank you, Amanda, for also contributing to it so generously.
Thank you.